who does MIT like?
Have you ever met a jerk who wanted to make the world a better place?
The reality is some schools are very siloed.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality.
Yeah.
And MIT is anything but siloed.
It's about gaining the skills that you need to make a difference. You're going to work hard.
Yeah.
That first semester core is a lot of work.
Hi, this is Harold Szymanski with the mbaMission podcast. I'm here today with my co-host, Jeremy Schonwald. Hi, Jeremy.
Nice to be back, Harold.
And we're here as well with the Assistant Dean of Admissions for the MIT Sloan School of Management, Dawna Levenson.
Hi, thank you for having me.
MIT Sloan is truly exceptional. It distinguishes itself as far more than just another business school. What really sets it apart is how it blends business and innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship in a way that's totally unique. It's the place where cutting-edge ideas meet real-world application, and you can feel that energy everywhere. So what makes MIT unique?
Oh, really?
Let's right out of the gates.
Exactly.
Well, actually, it is the MIT. So what makes MIT Sloan unique is, in fact, the MIT and MIT Sloan. And what that means is really something different to every one of our students. What it provides is an opportunity for you as a Sloan student to take advantage of clubs, conferences, competitions, classes throughout the institute. As an MIT Sloan student, you are also an MIT grad student. In fact, it begins with housing. So if you choose to come to MIT Sloan and live in a dorm with a roommate, your roommate could be a PhD in physics.
That makes sense. When I was at MIT Sloan, I lived in married student housing, sadly in a building that has since been torn down, just to tell you how long ago I was there. But my neighbors were some MBA students, but people from really all over the campus.
What percentage of the students live in campus housing?
That's a good question. So there's actually more campus housing now. So I think the building you're referring to is Eastgate.
That's right.
You lived there. I actually watched over 2 years them tear it down, cinder block by cinder block. It hasn't been replaced in its spot, but really near it is now Site 4, which is graduate housing, and Graduate Junction just opened on the other side of campus. Right. So Grad Junction brought on another 600 plus beds for grad students. So I actually don't know what that number is, but certainly the opportunity for people to live on campus has increased. The reality is, though, Sloan is very much a city school. Yeah. So there are actual just apartments that are very close to campus, and in some cases are closer to Sloan than some of the dorms are. Right. So there's lots of options from a housing standpoint.
Right. And I know one student passes it to the other.
And the IKEA furniture lives on forever.
That's right. Dawn, I'm going to tell you what I felt really unique about Sloan.
Okay.
And that was this notion of, I like to call it the efficiency of effort. When you get to Sloan, when you get to even look at the application, you think to yourself, Sloan knows what's important, knows what is not quite as important, and really focuses on those things that are important. So Dawna, picking up on the notion of the efficiency of effort, how do you see that playing out, particularly in the application?
Well, in the application, we have a very streamlined application process. As you will see, we fundamentally have a cover letter, which is an essay, and now a short essay. Yeah. We only have one letter of recommendation. We ask for just enough information to make it a first assessment as to whether or not we want to interview somebody. And then at the time of interview, we ask some additional information.
And also this notion, too, of you have the first semester only is the core. It's not a full year core.
Right. That's the other thing I was going to point out. We have a 1 semester core and then 3 semesters to really shape the rest of your experience, as you want in order to help you achieve whatever your goals are. The only option you have within that first semester is you now must pick one elective between marketing, finance, operations, and strategy.
Okay.
And then all of your other classes are set.
And then what do people end up doing for those next 3 semesters?
There's a whole variety of things you can do. If, in fact, though, you're interested in entrepreneurship, finance, enterprise management, sustainability, healthcare, data analytics, or product management, you may want to consider doing what we call certificates. Okay. We have certificates in each of those 7 areas. You can think of a certificate as a roadmap or concentration, and it very much helps to create a path for some of those 3 semesters. It helps you become part of a community of people with very similar interests. It helps you do a deep dive in a particular area. So not all, because they are optional, but many of our students will in fact choose to do 1 or more certificates during those 3 semesters.
That makes sense. And can non-Sloan students either participate in the same classes or do certificates themselves?
So the answer is both. So just like Sloan students can take classes throughout the rest of MIT, vice versa. So you could actually be in a finance class, a Sloan finance class, sitting next to a PhD in chemical engineering. And in particular, if you think about sustainability in healthcare or entrepreneurship, those are 3 areas where you can very much see. Entrepreneurship is so popular amongst our Sloan students, we've not yet opened it up to other students. And for the other 2, there's been a small uptick. I'm not sure how well they're publicized. So I think there's opportunity there for us. But they've been designed in such a way for students throughout MIT, grad students throughout MIT, to be able to participate.
So when we think about sort of the average Sloan student, what are we looking at here? We always think to ourselves, or certainly people say to me, oh, are you an engineer? I'm like, no, wasn't an engineer at all. And when people think about, okay, who is the average Sloan student? And I will say to people, anybody and everyone.
I am not a fan of averages. My favorite analogy is the average weather in the United States. That's pretty meaningless. Yeah. If you're in Florida and the average is, 20 degrees or 30 degrees that day. The best way to look at averages is, in fact, on our class profile that we publish at the end of every year. It gives you some sense, but what's actually always more meaningful, I think, are the ranges. And so, for example, average years of experience for a Sloan student is, in fact, 5. However, when you look at our middle 80%, it definitely runs more from 3 to 7 or 8. Okay. So there's a much wider range of people. We look at, so you talk about backgrounds. Only about 30% of any given class do in fact have an engineering background. And so what that means is that 70% don't. Right. That's a lot. We publish undergraduate backgrounds, we publish industries where people work, and you will see they truly run the gamut.
We're talking about the certificate programs, we're talking about levels of interest, particularly in entrepreneurship. Are there areas of Sloan that you wish the school was just better known for? You're like, yes, this is a gem for us. We're doing something really great in this area here.
So finance always comes to mind for me. I know that when people think about an interest in finance, which is very different today than perhaps it was 10 years ago when you think about a career in finance, perhaps Sloan is not at the top of people's list. Yet you show up at Sloan, you look at the caliber of our finance faculty. Yeah. You look at the finance ecosystem, which includes clubs and conferences, and people are blown away. Yeah. I get that question a lot during my interviews, and I do not hesitate to share this exact example.
At the end of the day, MIT Sloan certainly has a different feel from it from other schools. And I'm just going to, again, go back to my own experience here. When I was looking at business schools, I was accepted to one school. I went to their big event. It was a big rah-rah event. It was filled with people who were cheering, and it was really wonderful, and it was really terrific. And the next night, I went to the Sloan event. The Sloan event was about 20 of us, and there was a professor there who was well-known, Arnie Barnett, and he said, before you come to Sloan, I want to show you how we teach at Sloan. And he basically did a very short statistics class. And it was just like, this is the place I'm going to. It was smart. He was funny. The people were really super nice, but super serious. So from your perspective, comparing Sloan to basically everything out there, what is somebody going to see at Sloan that they may not see other places?
So I will tell you, like I tell anybody else, I'm not in the comparison business. I'm not. For a whole variety of reasons, including I don't actually know a lot about other schools, and I just don't think it's my position to compare. What I can tell you about Sloan is the following. We are very much a mission-driven school. In my own words, is to identify and solve the world's biggest and most complex problems in order to make the world a better place. There's more official words that you can read when you come visit, carved on the side of our Sloan cafeteria. But it's something that we take very seriously, and it's woven into the application process. We talk about it through the application. It's in the classroom. It's in the clubs, different clubs that we have. It's throughout the community. And it's about wanting to make the world a better place. And it's about not standing on ceremonies. It's about gaining the skills that you need to make a difference.
So how's that manifest? How do you teach individuals to adopt values like that, or to become capable of making the world a better place?
So I don't think we teach them values. I think these are people who already, these values are inherent in them, right, who migrate towards our program. Okay. I think what happens is people self-select out, and the population we're left with who apply to Sloan truly want to make the world a better place.
Right. Okay.
And what's interesting, what's a byproduct of that, is they tend to be pretty nice people.
Yeah.
Have you ever met a jerk who wanted to make the world a better place?
Very fair.
And so we're
Very,
left
very
with
fair.
an applicant pool and then eventually like a community of people who really want to make a difference, who really want to do whatever it takes, who don't stand on ceremonies, who are smart and creative and inventive and courageous, and who care about other people, and who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do whatever it takes to make a difference.
Right. No, that makes sense. And you talked a little bit about all that's happening outside of the Sloan classroom. What are some of those things? What is particularly exciting in your mind?
So outside of the classroom, we have just at Sloan alone, anywhere between now 80 and 90 clubs. My favorite example is called the Happy Belly Club. People like to experiment with new and different foods, and across all of our programs, they get together on a regular basis, try new restaurants, try new recipes. On the other end of the spectrum are all of our professional clubs, VCPE club, consulting club, retail club, education club, you name it. We have a whole bunch of geographically focused clubs. Yeah. We also have our affinity clubs. We have a Black Business Student Association, a Hispanic Business Club, Sloan Women in Management, our Pride Club, which is for our LGBTQ plus community, a Vets Club. So what these clubs do is in fact several things. Number one is they provide a community for people to either, it's a community that they're comfortable with already or a community that they're interested in exploring. It provides leadership opportunities. All of our clubs have multiple leadership positions. And so what you're learning about leadership, you're able to actually apply in these settings. Many of these clubs actually provide coaching for interviews. The best example is consulting. The consulting club really works with people who are interested in going into consulting to best prepare them for their interviews. They provide, opportunities, again, for you to experiment and try something that you otherwise may not have. Oh, and many of them actually, as a marquee event, will have an industry-wide conference.
Okay.
Which is an unbelievable experience around networking, project management, getting to know people in a particular industry.
Right. The skills that the student themselves build by planning one of these conferences is just, their interactions with the people
Correct.
who are coming to the conferences.
Yes. Yep.
That's right. Because I know they have the conference specifically sports analytics.
That's a big one.
Yeah. Now, and then there's a sustainability conference, if I remember correct.
Yes, there's many conferences, many.
And I guess one piece of the Sloan DNA is just this notion of innovation and entrepreneurship.
Sure.
How does Sloan think about that, not just in terms of the E-Club or the Martin Trust Center, but even just as part of the DNA of the entire school?
It is, in fact, that.
Yeah.
And so I think we have a fundamental belief that entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial skills are valuable in the startup world, but also in the very well-established corporate world, because companies are always looking to innovate themselves. So these are skills that we're hoping all of our students gain. You mentioned a few examples. Many of the entrepreneurial tools are housed in what is called the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. Very intentionally MIT and not MIT Sloan Entrepreneurship, although Sloan loves to call it its own. Yeah. And housed there is the 100K competition, Entrepreneurial E&I certificate. Yeah. We have entrepreneurs in residence who come and spend a year at Sloan just sharing their experiences and their advice with our students. There's Delta V, which is a summer incubator. We have one in the Boston area now and one in New York.
That's really interesting. That's fairly new, I think, in the sense of if I understand correctly, you finish a business plan, maybe you participate in the 100K, you then have the summer after you graduate to then actually launch the company.
Yep, so that is possible. Some people who really have figured it out can do it between their first and second year, but it's also open to people after their second year as well. There's the sandbox, which is a little bit less rigid. It's less resources also, but really anybody who has an idea that they want to explore through the sandbox, they're given some funding. And you hear the stories all the time of the people in the cafeteria, in the coffee line, who strike up a conversation. Yeah. The other that is really valuable, that in some cases is organic and in other times we'll say is a little bit forced in a good way, is the relationship between MIT Sloan students and the rest of campus. Yeah. Whether they be undergrads or grad students who have the ideas but have no idea how to scale them or take them to market.
Right.
And they then partner up with the Sloan student who has the business sense, and that's where great things happen.
No, that makes sense. And I'll give, again, some of my own personal experiences. The Martin Trust Center, you are actually talking to the Martin Trust Award winner right here. But the Martin Trust Center, the thing that I always love about it even more now is just how open it is. This notion here of practically anyone can walk in, grab some coffee. I may be in a little bit of the comparison business, and all I can say is at the Martin Trust Center at MIT, you walk in, you can meet people, you can sort of bump into people, take advantage of the free food. I hope I'm not sort of,
You're totally correct.
releasing any secrets. And then there is another university not that far away that has its own entrepreneurship center, and basically you need a security clearance even to get through that door. that there's this notion here
There's no bias in this podcast.
Exactly right.
This is the no bias
I mean,
podcast.
just listen, the reality is some schools are very siloed.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality.
Yeah.
And MIT is anything but siloed. Yeah.
What I want to just switch gears entirely, and I want to take a step back from what the program's about and just address one other type of applicant, and that's the deferred applicant. We haven't really talked about that person. And what has been your experience thus far with the deferred admissions process? And what does a deferred admit need to show you to reveal that they're mature enough to manage all this freedom? Because there's so much. I wouldn't have been. I'm telling you right now, I would not have been ready to have all that.
I think maturity is key. So we launched our deferred admissions program in 2019. And so we've now been doing it for, this will be our 6th year. It's not just for MIT undergrads. I think that's a misperception out there. So it's for anybody who is finishing up undergrad or grad school. I mean, fundamentally, you just have not worked full time.
Right.
And you can apply to our MBA program, get admitted, and then go work for 2 to 5 years. From what are we looking for standpoint, we have to be looking for very similar qualities as we are in our traditional MBA, because that's who you're going to be. And so we use all of the same, we call them competencies that we're looking for. We just know to look for them in slightly different places. And so the best example I can give is around relationship building. Very important quality for us. In our traditional MBA candidate, we're looking for evidence of meaningful relationship building in the workplace. For our early candidates, we're looking for it perhaps in a club that you've been in on campus, or if you play a sport, or in the classroom. We do ask for more letters of recommendation for our MBA earlies because we feel that faculty can provide some of the data that we're looking for. Oh, and we don't ask for an org chart because we know they haven't been working. So no org chart. But everything else is very similar. And again, it's really important that, if you're thinking about who our candidates are on a continuum, they are on the early stage of the same continuum as our students who are eventually admitted through the regular process. We reach out after the first 2 years and connect with people and say, are you ready next year? Are you ready next year? They actually sign up for a call with one of our admissions advisors. This doesn't often happen, but if they'd been sitting on the couch for 2 years, that's not okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's in their best interest. We're fundamentally, the spirit of this is that they've been doing substantive work. And I promise you, 95% of people have been doing substantive work. But we want to make sure of that.
Sure.
They have to tell us that they're serious by the end of the round 1 deadline, and they become part of our round 1 pool.
How many deferred admits were there in the last MIT class?
Yeah. So the last class was maybe 15%. Don't quote me on that of the class.
It's a lot of pressure on the pool. Like there are fewer spots.
But these are really, really good candidates. These are very. I mean, we always talk about the outliers, which is unfair because then it casts a shadow on everything else.
Right.
These are very, very strong candidates. These are people who most likely, when we're interviewing them in April, they've already secured a job. They've secured a job in many cases with a company who's going to sponsor them for an MBA down the road. These are people who, if we didn't give them the opportunity now, they're going to go somewhere else for the most part.
Right.
No, that makes sense then.
There's no particular demographic. It used to be that some deferred programs were trying to get more women in their pipeline or trying to get more science people in their pipeline, whatever it might be. There's no particular agenda in the deferred pipeline that you guys cultivate.
One might have argued that early on when there were only a few schools, but now that so many schools offer it, you're pretty much, you're just fighting for good talent early on.
Right.
That's really all it is. It's an early draft. So, and if you're not participating, and I'm not being critical of any school who isn't, but you're really missing out on some really top candidates.
Right. No, that makes sense then. Dawna, who does MIT like? When you see an applicant, like is there one through line? I recognize that again, no averages here. The reality is you're taking people from all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different experiences. Is there, you look at somebody, you're like, they're an MIT person, or maybe they're not an MIT person?
So I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question exactly, but this is what I tell people when they ask questions like yours. Fundamentally, we're looking for three things. We're looking for a demonstrated ability to be successful in a Sloan classroom. So that's really, one would argue academic excellence, but we can see that in many ways through your undergraduate GPA, your undergraduate major, perhaps you went to grad school, the work that you're doing and your work success, GMAT, GRE. We're looking for people who, and I think this is probably a differentiator, who have demonstrated the willingness, desirability to make an impact, make a difference, make a contribution. Right. That's really key. Then the third is around interpersonal skills. Someone who is a good team player and teammate, somebody who others would want to be around. And I've done, there's not that many combinations of this, but I've done, what if they had 2 out of the 3? And quite frankly, any 2 out of those 3, and it's not going to work.
Okay.
So fundamentally, these are 3 areas that we're really, really looking for. So much of the work that you're going to do, both at school and when you go in the workforce. I used to say, and this shows how old I am, she didn't retire that long ago, but unless you're Serena Williams, you're pretty much, that's an individual contributor, true. But for the most part, you're working with other people. And so having the right skill set, knowing when to lead and how to effectively lead and when to perhaps follow, really important skills.
As you think about folks who are really going to start at MIT Sloan, is there anything you think that'll really surprise them there?
Yes. So this is what surprises people. There's 2 things, I would say. And neither one of them are admission's fault because we tell you about both of them. One is you're going to work hard. Yeah. That first semester core is a lot of work. A lot of academic work. You're coming to school. You're coming to business school. It has the word school in it. It's surprising how many people are a little bit surprised of just how much schoolwork there is. Yeah. And we tell them. The second is really around community, which again, we tell people, but until you feel it, I don't think people fully appreciate it. Right. I like to walk around maybe the 3rd week of September and run into people I interviewed or I've met along the way and ask them, so what surprises you? And undoubtedly they will say, I know everybody talked about the community. Everybody talked about Sloanies helping Sloanies, but wow, it's real. I love my cohort. I love my core team. This is just amazing.
Yeah.
Again, even though we've told them about it. I'll say this about core teams. The majority of people love their core teams. They're in their weddings. There are those core teams, though, who count down the days till the semester's over.
Sure. Listen, that's any. Yeah.
Well,
that's it.
And a question that I get around that I actually love when people ask, so I'm going to ask for you too, is how do you create the core teams and how do you create these cohorts? Because again, we really want them to be representative of the whole community. Up until 3 years ago, it was a master spreadsheet with key fields like gender and geography and undergraduate major, industry that you work in, job function. And the program office, not admissions, but the program office would be doing a whole lot of filtering to get you 6 relatively even teams. 3 years ago, one of our faculty members wrote an AI engine that now does it in about 20 minutes.
Oh, well.
I think that's a great story.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Very MIT. But very, very MIT.
Like...
Okay, so a couple things, Dawna, that I want to make sure we cover is, first of all, just how are classes taught at MIT Sloan?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. So we've talked a lot about our students' flexibility in terms of those 3 semesters. To be honest, our faculty have lots of flexibility too. So we are not a one-size-fits-all school. We are not a case-based school. Each of our faculty truly have the ability to teach as he or she sees fit. And as a result, you have classes that are traditional lectures and problem sets. You do have some case-based classes. We have lots of project-based classes, lots and lots. And we have a category of projects that are our action learning labs. So experiential learning is really big at Sloan. And it actually aligns really well with the motto of MIT itself, mind in hand, mens in manus. And so these action learning lab classes, of which now we have close to 20 of them, they either focus on a subject matter or they focus on a geography.
Yeah.
So from a geography standpoint, we have an ASEAN lab, we have USA lab, we now have MENA lab,
Right.
and these are where you, as part of a team, are working on a project for a real company, helping a real company solve a real problem.
Dawna, I'm going to just sort of interrupt parenthetical here. I just find the USA lab amazing because USA, for certain people, means one portion of geography, one portion of the country. And for USA lab, it means something very different, going to places that are underserved in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Fishing villages in Seattle, one comes to mind, and a school district in a small town in Maine was another project I remember a few years ago as well. Like really interesting places where people are going. All of these projects are sourced well in advance of the start of the semester. At the beginning of the semester, all of the projects are laid out. People either come as a team or can be put in a team. And, there's a bit of a matching process. So all of the projects are explained. You as a student prioritize, and then there's a bit of a match.
And everyone can take one action lab. Is that how it works?
Oh, you can take more. So action learning is not a requirement to complete your MBA degree. However, if you're doing one of our 7 certificates, that I talked about, each one of those has, in fact, a lab requirement.
Okay. That makes sense then.
Similarly, like you talk about the innovation periods and the role it has in the educational experience.
So at Sloan, and this is not throughout MIT, but at Sloan, we have a break in the middle of each semester, the fall and the spring. This week in the middle has undergone a variety of names. I think for many people, SIP is what the familiar name is, which was Sloan Innovation Period, Sloan Intensive Period. It's fundamentally a week where break in traditional classes. There's lots of workshops around perhaps leadership. And so then there's lots of opportunities for other non-traditional workshops to be taken. In the spring, the SIP week is right before our MIT-wide spring break. So that's a 2-week period without classes. If you're doing a spring action learning lab class, you're traveling during that middle time period.
That makes sense. And of course, there's the classic MIT experience, which is the independent activity period during all of January that Sloan students can also participate in.
So the month of January at MIT is IAP. So what happens is the fall semester is from the first week in September through mid-December. This is in the holidays. Many schools return in session right after the first of the year. MIT does not. MIT does not start its spring semester till February 1 or whatever that Monday is right around it. And that whole month of January is really open for really interesting types of classes and workshops. And this has been an MIT legacy for many, many, many years.
You can write a business plan in January, or you can go to something called the Charm School, which is to help people just sharpen their social skills, which some of us need.
People are familiar. A while ago, there was a book and a movie called 21 around poker and playing poker. All that's just an MIT story.
Yeah.
And so poker is very popular at MIT. And so learning how to play poker, it's a very popular course during IAP. One would argue that cooking, especially baking, is all really built on chemistry. So there's baking class. Like, it's really meant to be extremely exploratory. To be honest, first-year MBAs, many of them are actually using that time period to secure an internship if they haven't already. And many second-year MBAs have taken GLab, Global Entrepreneurship Lab, in the fall. And so they're traveling that January to their company all over the world.
Dawna, the one thing I love to say to people about MIT is MIT just doesn't have to be the business school you want to go to. It's the only school you want to go to. I personally felt like MIT Sloan is like no other place in the world. It was just a wonderful experience. I don't want to give too much of a commercial here by all means.
Keep on going.
But the reality is MIT Sloan is just a wonderful place. So on that note, this is Harold Szymanski, mbaMission, with my co-host Jeremy Scheinwald and the Assistant Dean of Admissions for MIT Sloan School of Management, Dawna Levenson. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.